The medical bay of the Galactic Coalition station smelled of sterile chemicals and something else, something bitter that made Dr. Marcus Chun wrinkle his nose every time he entered. He had been the only human physician assigned to Outpost Vera, 9 for 3 standard cycles now, and he still wasn't used to the strange mix of alien biology that passed through his clinic daily. Today started like any other morning. Marcus checked his diagnostic equipment, calibrated the universal scanner, and reviewed the appointment schedule on his datapad. Most of his patients were routine cases: a Threxian with a mild respiratory infection, a Kalari engineer with a sprained manipulator limb, and a scheduled checkup for Ambassador Thalera, a high-ranking Valian diplomat stationed at the outpost. The Valians were an interesting species. They stood roughly 7 feet tall, with elongated limbs and skin that shimmered between shades of pale blue and silver depending on their emotional state. Their large, dark eyes took up nearly a quarter of their face, and they communicated through a combination of spoken words and subtle bioluminescent patterns that rippled across their skin. Marcus had treated a few Valian patients before, mostly for minor ailments, and found them to be reserved but polite. Ambassador Thalera arrived precisely on time, as was typical of her species. She moved with the grace of a dancer, her long fingers clasped in front of her as she entered the examination room. Marcus noticed immediately that something was wrong. Her skin, usually a healthy pale blue, had taken on a grayish tint, and the bioluminescent patterns that normally flickered gently across her shoulders and neck were dim, barely visible. "Ambassador," Marcus said, gesturing to the examination platform, "please have a seat. I can see you're not feeling well." Thalera settled onto the platform with visible effort. Her breathing was shallow and rapid, and when she spoke, her voice carried a tremor that hadn't been there during her previous visits. "Dr. Chun, I apologize for my appearance. I have been experiencing unusual symptoms for the past several days. I hoped they would pass, but they have only worsened." Marcus pulled up her medical file on his console, reviewing her previous health records. Valians were generally robust, with excellent immune systems and remarkable regenerative capabilities. Serious illnesses were rare among them. "Can you describe what you've been experiencing?" "Fatigue, primarily," Thalera explained. "I struggle to complete even simple tasks. There's also pain here." She gestured to her lower torso. "A constant ache that grows sharper when I move. And my skin, as you can see, has lost its proper coloration." Marcus began his examination, using the universal scanner to analyze her vital signs. What he saw on the display made his stomach tighten with concern. Her blood pressure was dangerously low. Her core temperature had dropped several degrees below normal for a Valian, and her cellular oxygenation levels were at barely 60% of what they should be. Most alarming was the presence of an unknown pathogen in her bloodstream, something the scanner's extensive medical database couldn't identify. "Ambassador, I'm going to need to run some additional tests," Marcus said, trying to keep his voice calm and professional. "Your symptoms are more serious than I initially thought. This pathogen in your system, it's not in any of our medical databases. Have you been exposed to any unusual environments recently? Any unexplored planets or unfiltered atmospheres?" Thalera's skin flickered with what Marcus had learned was the Valian expression of confusion. "No, doctor. I have remained on the station for the past 6 cycles. My duties have kept me confined to the diplomatic quarters and the council chambers. I have had no exposure to potentially contaminated environments." Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. If she had contracted this illness here on the station, without any obvious source of exposure, it meant the pathogen could potentially spread to others. He needed to isolate the cause and find a treatment quickly, not just for Thalera's sake, but for everyone on Outpost Vera 9. Over the next several hours, Marcus ran every test he could think of. He analyzed tissue samples, studied her cellular structure under magnification, and consulted the station's main medical database along with specialized Valian medical texts. The more he learned, the more worried he became. The pathogen was unlike anything he had encountered before. It was systematically attacking her blood cells, preventing them from carrying oxygen efficiently throughout her body. Without oxygen reaching her vital organs, Thalera would deteriorate rapidly. By evening, the ambassador's condition had worsened considerably. She could barely sit upright, and her breathing had become labored. Marcus had moved her to one of the medical bay's isolation rooms and started her on a broad-spectrum antimicrobial treatment, but it seemed to have no effect whatsoever. He contacted the station's chief medical officer, a Thalian doctor named Vixren, who came immediately to consult. Vixren examined the data with her 4 eyes, scanning multiple screens simultaneously. The Thalian doctor's specialized medical training covered hundreds of species, and she had decades more experience than Marcus. But even she seemed stumped. "This is most unusual," Vixren said in her clicking, insectoid voice. "The pathogen is adaptive. It modifies its structure to resist whatever treatment we apply. I have seen similar behavior in certain parasitic organisms, but never in a simple pathogen. Can we synthesize an antidote?" Marcus asked. "If we can map its genetic structure, maybe we could design something specific to target it." "The process would take weeks," Vixren replied, "even with our fastest gene sequencers. And I must tell you honestly, Dr. Chun, Ambassador Thalera, does not have weeks. Based on the rate of her cellular degradation, she has perhaps 3 or 4 days before her organs begin to fail." Marcus felt helpless. He stared at the monitors showing Thalera's failing vital signs and racked his brain for any solution. There had to be something they could do, some treatment they hadn't considered yet. He thought about the fundamental problem. Her blood cells were being destroyed, preventing oxygen from reaching her tissues. What if they could supplement her blood somehow, give her system enough functional cells to fight off the pathogen while they worked on a cure? What about a transfusion? Marcus suggested. If we could provide her with healthy blood cells from a compatible donor, it might buy us time to develop a proper treatment. Vixren's antennae twitched, and what Marcus had learned was the Thalian equivalent of shaking one's head. Valian blood is highly specialized. Their cells have a unique crystalline structure that allows them to process oxygen far more efficiently than most species. Finding a compatible donor would be nearly impossible. Even among other Valians, matches are rare. We have only 4 other Valians on this station, and I've already checked. None are compatible with Ambassador Thalera's blood type. Marcus slumped against the console, feeling defeated. He watched through the window as Thalera lay motionless on the medical bed, her skin now a dull gray color, her bioluminescent patterns completely dark. She looked like she was fading away right before his eyes. That night, Marcus couldn't sleep. He sat in his quarters, staring at his own research notes about comparative biology. He had always been fascinated by the similarities and differences between human physiology and that of other species. Humans were unusual in the galactic community. They were remarkably adaptable, with immune systems that seemed capable of handling threats that would devastate other species. Their blood, while simple compared to some alien species, had a robustness that scientists still didn't fully understand. An idea began to form in his mind. It was crazy, possibly dangerous, and went against every protocol he had been taught. But as he looked at the medical literature comparing human and Valian blood chemistry, he noticed something interesting. While the structures were different on a cellular level, the basic functions were remarkably similar. Both used iron-based compounds to transport oxygen. Both had similar pH levels, and both contained complex proteins that could potentially cross-react. What if human blood could serve as a temporary substitute? Not a perfect match, certainly, but perhaps good enough to keep Thalera alive while they developed a real cure. The human immune system was incredibly aggressive, constantly producing antibodies against new threats. Those antibodies might even help fight the pathogen that was killing her. Marcus knew he was grasping at straws, but he couldn't just watch Thalera die without trying everything possible. He spent the rest of the night running simulations on his personal console, modeling what might happen if human blood was introduced to a Valian system. The results were inconclusive, showing both potential benefits and serious risks. But time was running out, and desperate situations call for desperate measures. The next morning, Marcus returned to the medical bay to find Thalera's condition had deteriorated even further overnight. Her breathing was barely perceptible, and her skin had taken on an almost translucent quality. Vixrin stood beside her bed, her four eyes dim with what Marcus recognized as grief. "She will not survive another day," the Thalian doctor said quietly. "I have contacted her family on the Valian homeworld. They are arranging transport, but I doubt she will live long enough to see them." Marcus took a deep breath. "I have an idea. It's unconventional, and there are significant risks, but I believe it might save her life." Vixrin turned to face him fully. "I am listening, Dr. Chun." "A transfusion using human blood," Marcus said quickly, before he could talk himself out of it. "I know it sounds impossible, but I've spent all night analyzing the compatibility factors. Human blood has properties that might allow it to function temporarily in a Valiant system. More importantly, human immune cells are extremely aggressive. They might be able to fight the pathogen that's killing her." Vixrin's antennae quivered with what Marcus thought might be shock. "Dr. Chun, such a procedure has never been attempted. The risks are enormous. The introduction of foreign proteins could trigger a catastrophic immune response. Her body might reject the transfusion violently." "I know," Marcus admitted. "But look at her. She's dying anyway. If we do nothing, she'll be dead by tomorrow. At least this gives her a chance." The Thalian doctor was silent for a long moment, studying the monitors that showed Thalera's fading vital signs. Finally, she spoke. "You will be the donor, I presume?" "Yes. I'm healthy. My blood type is O negative, which is the universal donor type among humans. If any human blood has a chance of being compatible, it's mine." "This could end your medical career," Vixrin warned. "If something goes wrong, if the ambassador dies because of this procedure, the consequences will be severe. The Valiant government might demand your prosecution. The medical board will certainly review your license." Marcus looked through the window at Thalera's still form. He thought about the conversations they'd had during her previous checkups, how she'd asked him about Earth and human culture with genuine curiosity. He remembered her gentle laugh when he'd explained the concept of coffee to her, and how she'd surprised him the next week with a gift, a rare Valiant tea that she thought he might enjoy. "I became a doctor to save lives," Marcus said quietly. "If I let her die without trying everything I can, then I don't deserve to be a physician anyway." Vixrin studied him for a long moment, then made a gesture that Marcus thought might be the Thalian equivalent of a nod. "Very well, Dr. Chun. I will assist you with the procedure. But we must be extremely careful. We will start with a small transfusion, monitoring her response at every stage. At the first sign of rejection or adverse reaction, we stop immediately." "Agreed, agreed," Marcus said, feeling both terrified and determined. They spent the next hour preparing. Marcus submitted to a full medical screening to ensure his blood was free of any diseases or contaminants. Vixrin set up the transfusion equipment and prepared emergency medications in case Thalera's body rejected the foreign blood. They configured the monitors to track every possible vital sign and cellular response. When everything was ready, Marcus lay down on a medical bed next to Thalera's. A technician inserted an IV line into his arm, while Vixrin prepared the filtration system that would process his blood before introducing it into the ambassador's system. The plan was to start with just 100 milliliters, a small amount that would hopefully provide some benefit without overwhelming Thalera's failing system. Beginning extraction, Vixrin announced. Marcus felt the familiar sensation of blood being drawn from his arm. He watched as the rich red fluid traveled through the transparent tubes into the filtration system, where it was analyzed, processed, and prepared for transfusion. Human blood composition confirmed normal, Vixrin read from her console. Iron content elevated compared to Valiant standards, but within acceptable parameters. Antibody activity is notably high, as Dr. Chin predicted. Beginning modified transfusion now. Marcus held his breath as he watched the processed blood begin to flow through the four-line into Thalera's arm. For the first few moments, nothing happened. The monitors continued to show the same failing vital signs, the same steady decline toward death. Then, almost imperceptibly, something changed. One of the monitors beeped softly, indicating a shift in blood oxygen levels. It was small, barely a 2% increase, but it was an increase nonetheless. Marcus and Vixrin both leaned forward, watching the displays intently. "Her cellular oxygenation is improving," Vixrin said, her voice filled with cautious hope. "The human blood cells are functioning. They're carrying oxygen to her tissues." Over the next 10 minutes, the improvements continued. Thalera's blood pressure ticked upward slightly. Her breathing, while still shallow, became more regular. Most remarkably, the faintest hint of blue began to return to her grayish skin. "Incredible," Vixrin whispered. "The human immune cells are attacking the pathogen. Look at this cellular analysis, Dr. Chun. Your antibodies are targeting and destroying the infected cells." Marcus felt a wave of relief wash over him. It was working. Against all odds, his crazy idea was actually working. But he knew they weren't out of danger yet. This was just the first small transfusion. They needed to continue carefully monitoring every response, ready to stop if anything went wrong. They waited another hour, observing Thalera's continued gradual improvement, before attempting a second transfusion. This one was slightly larger, 200 milliliters, and again her body responded positively. By evening, they had completed 4 transfusions, and the change in the ambassador was remarkable. Her skin had regained much of its natural blue coloration. Her breathing was nearly normal, and for the first time in days, her bioluminescent patterns flickered weakly across her shoulders. Marcus was exhausted, both from the blood loss and from the emotional strain of the past day, but he felt more hopeful than he had since Thalera first fell ill. Vixrin ordered him to rest, promising to monitor the ambassador throughout the night and contact him immediately if her condition changed. As Marcus made his way back to his quarters, he thought about what they had accomplished. They had crossed a boundary that had never been crossed before, mixing human and alien biology in a way that should have been impossible. And somehow, miraculously, it had worked. But he couldn't shake the feeling that they had set something in motion, something they didn't fully understand yet. The full implications of what they had done were still unknown, waiting to reveal themselves in the days and weeks to come. Marcus woke to his communicator buzzing insistently on his bedside table. He grabbed it groggily, squinting at the timestamp that showed it was barely 5 hours since he had gone to bed. The caller ID showed it was Vixrin from the medical bay. "Dr. Chun here," he answered, his heart already racing with worry. "You need to come to the medical bay immediately." Vixrin's voice came through, and Marcus couldn't tell if the tone was urgent or excited. "Ambassador Thalera is awake and asking for you. Her recovery has been extraordinary." Marcus threw on his uniform and rushed through the empty corridors of the station. When he arrived at the medical bay, he found Thalera sitting upright on her bed, looking more alive than she had in over a week. Her skin had returned to its healthy pale blue shade, and the bioluminescent patterns across her shoulders and neck pulsed with gentle light. She turned to face him as he entered, and Marcus was struck by the intensity in her large dark eyes. "Dr. Chun," she said, her voice stronger than he had heard it in days. "Dr. Vixrin has explained what you did. You gave me your own blood to save my life." Marcus felt suddenly self-conscious. "It was an experimental procedure, Ambassador. I'm just glad it worked. How are you feeling?" "Remarkably well," Thalera replied, and Marcus noticed something different in the way she moved, a new energy that seemed to radiate from her. "Better than I've felt in many cycles, actually. It's strange, Dr. Chun. I feel changed somehow. Stronger. More vital. Is this a normal response to the transfusion?" Vixrin gestured to the medical displays showing Thalera's current readings. "Her vital signs are not merely normal, Dr. Chun. They're significantly elevated above typical Valian baselines. Her immune system activity has increased by nearly 40%. Her cellular regeneration rate is double what it was before the illness. And, most intriguingly, traces of human antibodies are still present in her bloodstream, actively circulating through her system. Marcus moved closer to study the data, his medical curiosity overriding his exhaustion. That's unusual. I would have expected her immune system to clear out the foreign blood cells within a few hours. How long has it been since the last transfusion? 14 hours, Vixaren replied. And yet the human cells show no signs of breaking down. More than that, they appear to have integrated with her own cellular structure. I've never seen anything like it in my entire career. Over the next few days, Marcus and Vixaren conducted extensive testing on Thalera, documenting her unprecedented recovery and the strange fusion of human and Valian biology occurring in her body. The pathogen that had nearly killed her was completely gone, destroyed by the aggressive human immune cells. But those cells hadn't simply done their job and died off as expected. Instead, they had somehow adapted to survive in her alien physiology, creating a hybrid immune system that was far more powerful than either species possessed alone. News of the successful treatment spread quickly through the medical community on Outpost Veronine. Other doctors and researchers requested access to the data, fascinated by the implications. Marcus found himself fielding questions from xenobiologists, immunologists, and medical ethicists, all trying to understand how such an impossible fusion could have occurred. But it was during a routine follow-up examination 2 weeks after the initial transfusion that something truly unexpected happened. Thalera had come in for a scheduled checkup, and Marcus was running a full-body scan to ensure there were no lingering effects from her illness. As the scanner passed over her torso, Marcus noticed an anomaly in the readings. There was a small, distinct mass in her lower abdomen, roughly the size of a marble, with a unique cellular signature that didn't match either human or Valian biology. Ambassador, Marcus said carefully, reviewing the scan data multiple times to make sure he wasn't misreading it. I'm seeing something unusual here. There's a growth in your abdomen. It doesn't appear to be malignant, but I'd like to run some additional tests to determine what it is. Thalera's bioluminescent patterns flickered with what Marcus had learned was concern. A growth? Could it be related to the pathogen? I don't think so, Marcus said, pulling up more detailed imaging. The cellular structure is completely different. It's actually quite remarkable. The cells appear to be dividing rapidly, but in a controlled, organized manner. It's almost like he trailed off as the full implication of what he was seeing hit him. Vixaren, who had been assisting with the examination, leaned over to look at the displays. Her antennae went rigid with shock. Dr. Chun, those cellular patterns. That's embryonic development. Early stage gestation. Marcus felt his mouth go dry. That's impossible. Ambassador Thalera, have you been in contact with any male Valians recently? Any encounters that might have resulted in conception? Thalera's skin flushed with a deeper blue that Marcus recognized as embarrassment or distress. No, doctor. I have been alone since arriving at this station over a cycle ago. I have had no intimate contact with anyone of my species or any other species. This cannot be what you're suggesting. But the evidence on the screen was undeniable. Marcus ran the scan 3 more times, each confirming the same result. There was a developing embryo in Thalera's body, and its genetic signature was unlike anything in the medical database. It had markers from Valian DNA. That much was clear from the cellular structure and certain protein sequences. But intertwined with those markers were unmistakable traces of human genetic material. I don't understand how this is possible, Marcus said, his mind racing through every bit of xenobiology he had ever studied. Cross-species reproduction between humans and Valians shouldn't be biologically feasible. The genetic structures are too different, the reproductive systems incompatible. Vixaren was scrolling through historical medical records on her console, her 4 eyes scanning rapidly. There have been cases of spontaneous genetic recombination following transfusions, but never anything like this. The human blood cells you transfused into Ambassador Thalera, they didn't just integrate with her immune system. They appear to have interacted with her reproductive system in some way, triggering a spontaneous genetic fusion. You're saying the transfusion caused this? Marcus asked, feeling a wave of panic rising in his chest. My blood somehow created a pregnancy? Not a pregnancy in the traditional sense, Vixrin clarified. There was no fertilization, no joining of gametes. This appears to be something else entirely. The human genetic material from your blood cells has merged with Valian cellular structures to create a new, hybrid organism. It's parthenogenesis, but modified and influenced by the foreign DNA. Thalera had been sitting silently during this exchange, her bioluminescent patterns dimming and brightening erratically as she processed the information. Dr. Chun, she said finally, her voice steady despite the shocking news. What you're telling me is that I'm carrying a child, and that child is somehow part human and part Valiant, created from the blood you gave me to save my life? Marcus nodded slowly, still struggling to accept what the evidence was clearly showing. It appears so, Ambassador. I'm so sorry. I never imagined something like this could happen. When I suggested the transfusion, I was only thinking about saving your life. I never considered that it might lead to something like this. Do not apologize, Doctor, Thalera said firmly. You saved my life when I was dying. Whatever has resulted from that act, it is not your fault. This is unprecedented, something that has never occurred in the known galaxy. We must focus now on understanding what this means and what happens next. Over the following weeks, Marcus and his medical team monitored Thalera's condition closely. The hybrid embryo continued to develop at a rate faster than normal Valian gestation, showing characteristics from both species. It had the crystalline cellular structure of Valian biology, but the robust cellular division rate of human development. The pregnancy was progressing smoothly, with none of the complications that typically occurred when biological incompatibilities arose. Word of the situation eventually reached the station's command structure and, inevitably, the Valian Diplomatic Corps. Marcus found himself called into a meeting with Station Commander Relax, a stern Krillian military officer, and two Valian ambassadors who had arrived specifically to discuss the situation. The meeting room was tense. Commander Relax sat at the head of the table, his scaled face unreadable. The two Valian ambassadors, both older males with elaborate bioluminescent patterns marking their status, regarded Marcus with what he could only describe as intense scrutiny. Dr. Chun, Commander Relax began, you understand the unprecedented nature of this situation. You performed an experimental medical procedure that has resulted in a hybrid pregnancy. The Valian government, as well as our own coalition medical board, has serious concerns about the implications. One of the Valian ambassadors, who had introduced himself as High Counselor Reneth, leaned forward. Dr. Chun, I want to be clear that we recognize you acted in good faith to save Ambassador Thalera's life. However, what has occurred raises profound questions. If human blood can spontaneously create hybrid offspring with Valian biology, what does this mean for future interactions between our species? What are the risks and benefits? And, most importantly, what is the nature of the entity growing inside the ambassador? Marcus had prepared for these questions, but they still weighed heavily on him. High Counselor, I've spent every waking hour since the discovery studying this phenomenon. What occurred with Ambassador Thalera appears to be a unique confluence of factors. The specific pathogen she contracted, the way it attacked her cellular structure, created conditions that made her biology temporarily more receptive to genetic integration. Additionally, my blood type and genetic markers seem to have been unusually compatible with her system. Are you saying this could not be replicated? The other Valian ambassador asked. I'm saying I don't know, Marcus admitted. It might be a 1 in a billion occurrence, or it might be something that could happen again under similar circumstances. We need more research, more data. But I want to emphasize that this was never intentional. The goal was always simply to save a life. Commander Relax pulled up a holographic display showing complex genetic analyses. The xenobiology team has been studying the genetic structure of the developing hybrid. Their findings are remarkable. The entity possesses functional genetic sequences from both humans and Valians, integrated in ways that shouldn't be possible according to our understanding of biology. It's not simply a mixture of traits. It's a true fusion, a new genetic pattern that has never existed before. High Counselor Renetha's bioluminescent patterns pulsed thoughtfully. This raises another question, Dr. Chun. What rights does this hybrid possess? Is it human? Valiant? Something entirely new? These are not merely academic questions. They have profound legal, social, and political implications. Marcus felt the weight of that question. He hadn't thought beyond the immediate medical implications, but the counselor was right. If this hybrid child was born successfully, what would its status be in galactic society? Would it be recognized as a citizen of Earth, of the Valiant homeworld, both or neither? I believe, Marcus said carefully, that should be a decision made by Ambassador Thalera. She is the one carrying this child, the one whose life will be most affected by its existence. Whatever rights or status the hybrid possesses, she should have the primary voice in determining them. The Valiant ambassadors exchanged looks, their patterns synchronizing in a way that Marcus had learned indicated agreement. That is a fair perspective, Dr. Chun, High Counselor Reneth said. We will consult with Ambassador Thalera on these matters. However, understand that the Valiant High Council will need to be involved in these decisions. This situation affects not just one individual, but potentially the future relationship between humans and Valiants. After the meeting ended, Marcus felt emotionally drained. He returned to his quarters and sat in the darkness, thinking about how quickly his life had changed. 3 weeks ago, he had been a routine physician on a remote outpost, dealing with minor ailments and standard checkups. Now, he was at the center of a situation that could reshape interspecies relations across the galaxy. His communicator chimed, showing a message from Thalera requesting to meet with him privately. Marcus made his way to her diplomatic quarters, a spacious suite decorated with Valiant art and furnishings that seemed to glow softly with their own internal light. Thalera greeted him at the door, and Marcus was again struck by how vibrant she looked. The pregnancy seemed to be enhancing her natural bioluminescence, making her patterns more vivid and complex than any Valiant he had seen before. "Thank you for coming, Doctor," she said, gesturing for him to sit. "I wanted to speak with you away from official meetings and medical examinations. I wanted to speak with you as one person to another about what is happening." Marcus sat down, grateful for the chance to have an honest conversation. "How are you feeling about all of this, Ambassador? I can't imagine how overwhelming it must be." Thalera's patterns shifted to softer, more contemplative colors. "It is overwhelming, yes, but also extraordinary. I can feel it growing inside me, Doctor. This hybrid life that shouldn't exist, but does. And the strangest thing is that it feels right somehow. Despite the impossibility, despite the unprecedented nature of it all, I feel connected to this being in a way I never expected. The High Council will want you to make decisions about the future," Marcus said, "about what happens when a child is born, about its rights and status. That's a tremendous burden to place on you." "I know," Thalera replied, "but I have already begun to think about these questions. Dr. Chin, Marcus, if I may call you that, what we have created, however accidentally, is something unique in the galaxy. This child will be neither fully human nor fully Valiant, but something new. Perhaps it is not a tragedy, but an opportunity." Marcus felt a surge of respect for this woman who had faced death, then the shocking revelation of an impossible pregnancy, and was somehow approaching it all with such grace and wisdom. "What do you mean?" Thalera stood and walked to the window, looking out at the stars beyond the station. "For as long as species have traveled the galaxy, we have maintained our separateness. We cooperate, we trade, we establish diplomatic relationships. But we remain fundamentally distinct, isolated in our own biological identities. This child breaks that isolation. It is a bridge between two worlds, living proof that the barriers between species are not as absolute as we believed. That's a beautiful way to look at it, Marcus said. But it's also going to terrify a lot of people. There will be those who see this as a threat, a contamination of pure species lines. I know, Thalera acknowledged. Change always frightens those who benefit from the status quo. But I believe this child has the potential to be something remarkable. And whatever comes, Marcus, I want you to know that I do not blame you. You gave me life, and if that life has taken an unexpected form, perhaps it is simply the universe's way of showing us new possibilities. As Marcus left Thalera's quarters that evening, he felt a strange mixture of hope and trepidation. They were entering uncharted territory, and no one could predict what lay ahead. But he knew that whatever happened, this moment would be remembered as a turning point, the day that the boundaries between species began to blur, creating something entirely new in the process. 3 months had passed since the discovery of Thalera's pregnancy, and Outpost Vera 9 had become the focal point of intense scientific and political attention. Research teams from across the Galactic Coalition had requested permission to study the unprecedented phenomenon, while diplomatic channels buzzed with discussions about the implications of human-Valian genetic compatibility. Marcus had found himself thrust into an unwanted spotlight. His medical logs had been reviewed by dozens of xenobiology experts, his procedures scrutinized by ethics committees from multiple planetary governments. Some praised his innovative thinking and willingness to take risks to save a life. Others condemned him for recklessness and for proceeding with an untested treatment without proper authorization. Through it all, Thalera remained at the center, her body changing in ways that fascinated and puzzled the medical teams monitoring her. The pregnancy was progressing faster than normal Valian gestation, which typically lasted 14 standard months. Based on the current development rate, the medical team estimated she would give birth in approximately 8 months total, closer to human pregnancy duration. The hybrid fetus was developing remarkably well. Regular scans showed a healthy organism with a unique physiology that combined features for both parent species. It had the elongated limbs characteristic of Valians, but with bone density closer to human norms. Its developing neural structure showed the complex branching of Valian cognitive architecture, but with neural firing patterns similar to human brain activity. Most striking were the preliminary signs of bioluminescent capability, the distinctive Valian trait that allowed them to communicate through light patterns, but these appear to be more developed and vibrant than in typical Valian infants. Dr. Vixarin had taken charge of the medical monitoring, coordinating with specialists from both Earth and the Valian homeworld. She had assembled a team of the best xenobiologists, geneticists, and obstetric specialists available, all working together to ensure both Thalera and the developing hybrid remained healthy. The rate of cellular development is extraordinary, Vixarin explained to Marcus during one of their regular briefings. Human cells divide rapidly, while Valian cells are slower but more precise. The hybrid appears to have inherited the speed of human cellular division with the precision of Valian biological processes. It's developing faster than either species naturally would, but with remarkable stability. Marcus studied the latest scan results on the display. What about potential complications? Are there any signs of rejection or incompatibility? None whatsoever, Vixarin replied, her antennae twitching with what Marcus recognized as excitement. In fact, Ambassador Thalera's body has adapted remarkably well to the pregnancy. Her enhanced immune system, the one created by the fusion of human and Valian immune cells, appears to be protecting both her and the fetus. She's actually healthier now than she was before the illness. That's incredible, Marcus said, feeling a mixture of relief and continued amazement at what they were witnessing. Has there been any progress in understanding why this happened? Why the transfusion led to genetic recombination? Vixarin pulled up a complex genetic analysis on her screen. The research teams have developed several theories. The prevailing one is that the pathogen that nearly killed Ambassador Thalera fundamentally altered her cellular structure at a genetic level. It didn't just attack her blood cells. It modified them, making them temporarily unstable and receptive to foreign genetic material. When your human blood was introduced, her modified cells didn't just accept it for immune function. They incorporated it at a chromosomal level. So the pathogen was actually the catalyst, Marcus said, understanding dawning. Without it, a simple transfusion would have been rejected or at most provided temporary immune support. But because it had already destabilized her genetic structure, the human DNA was able to integrate and trigger this spontaneous recombination. Precisely, Vixarin confirmed, which means attempting to replicate this process would be extremely difficult and dangerous. The conditions would have to be exactly right, and even then, success is far from guaranteed. This truly appears to be a unique occurrence. That evening, Marcus was summoned to another meeting, this time with representatives from Earth government. The video conference connected him with 3 officials from the Unified Earth Council: Dr. Sarah Okonkwo, the head of Earth's Xenobiology Research Division; Admiral James Park, representing Earth's military interests; and Counselor Maria Reyes, a senior diplomatic official. Dr. Chun, Counselor Reyes began, her face on the screen showing both interest and concern. We've been following the developments on Outpost Vera 9 with great attention. The Valia High Council has been in contact with us regarding the status of the hybrid child. They've proposed a joint custody arrangement, with the child spending time on both Earth and the Valian homeworld. Marcus felt uncomfortable being part of these high-level discussions. With respect, Counselor, shouldn't these decisions be made primarily by Ambassador Thalera? She's the one carrying the child. Of course, Counselor Reyes agreed, and her wishes will be paramount. However, there are broader implications to consider. This child will be the first of its kind, the only human Valian hybrid in existence. Its very existence proves that interspecies genetic compatibility is possible, which raises numerous questions about the future of human and Valian relations. Dr. Okonkwo leaned forward her seat. Dr. Chun, from a scientific standpoint, this hybrid represents an unprecedented opportunity for research. We need to understand how human and Valian DNA can coexist in a single organism. What capabilities might this hybrid possess? What advantages or challenges might it face? These questions have implications not just for biology, but for our understanding of life itself. Admiral Park spoke next, his military bearing evident even through the video screen. There are also security considerations. Doctor, if human blood can trigger genetic recombination with Valians, what about other species? Could this be used as a weapon? Or conversely, could it be used to create enhanced soldiers or operatives with the best traits of multiple species? We need to ensure this knowledge is controlled and protected. Marcus felt a chill at the Admiral's words. He had been so focused on the medical and personal aspects of the situation that he hadn't fully considered the potential military applications. Admiral, this was a medical accident, not a reproducible procedure. The specific circumstances that led to Ambassador Thalera's pregnancy were unique and probably can't be deliberately recreated. Probably isn't good enough, Doctor, Admiral Park replied firmly. We need certainty. That's why I'm recommending that all research data related to this case be classified at the highest levels. We can't risk this information falling into the wrong hands. Counselor Reyes held up a hand, mediating between the different viewpoints. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. Dr. Chun, Earth's government wants to support you and Ambassador Thalera through this unprecedented situation. We also want to ensure that both Earth's interests and the interests of this unique child are protected. To that end, we're assigning a diplomatic liaison to Outpost Vera 9 to coordinate with the Valian representatives. Marcus nodded, understanding that his simple medical decision had spiraled into something far larger than he ever imagined. I appreciate the support, Counselor. My primary concern is ensuring that Ambassador Thalera and the child remain healthy. Everything else is secondary to that. After the call ended, Marcus made his way to the medical bay for his regular check-in with Thalera. He found her in one of the private examination rooms, looking out the viewport at the stars. Her pregnancy was now visible, a gentle swelling in her torso that seemed to pulse softly with bioluminescent light. "Marcus," she greeted him with a smile. "I've been expecting you. I assume you've just finished speaking with your government officials?" "How did you know?" Marcus asked, surprised. Thalera's patterns flickered with amusement. "The Valiant High Council contacted me immediately after their meeting with Earth's representatives. It seems everyone wants to have a say in the future of my child." Marcus sat down across from her, feeling the weight of frustration and concern. "I'm sorry you're having to deal with all this political maneuvering. This should be a personal, private experience for you." "Perhaps it should be," Thalera agreed. "But we both know that's impossible now. This child is more than just my offspring. It's a symbol, a precedent, a bridge between worlds. I've come to accept that its life will never be entirely private." "How do you feel about that?" Marcus asked. "About raising a child who will be constantly studied, analyzed, and scrutinized." Thalera placed a hand on her swollen belly, and Marcus saw the bioluminescent patterns there pulse in response, as if the child within was already communicating with its mother. "I feel protective, naturally, but I also feel honored. This child will have opportunities no one has ever had before. It will belong to two worlds, understand two cultures, bridge two species. That's a gift, even if it comes with challenges." "The governments want joint custody arrangements," Marcus said. "Time split between Earth and the Valiant homeworld. What do you think about that?" Thalera was quiet for a moment, her patterns shifting through thoughtful colors. "I think the child should know both heritages, yes. But I also think we need to be careful not to make it feel torn between two identities. It is not half human and half Valiant. It is something new, something whole in itself. We must honor that." Over the following weeks, Marcus watched as preparations were made for the eventual birth. The medical bay was equipped with specialized equipment that could handle both human and Valiant physiology. Dr. Vixrin consulted with obstetric specialists from both species, creating a comprehensive birth plan that accounted for every possible complication. But alongside the medical preparations, Marcus noticed something else developing. Thalera had begun to experience changes beyond the physical. She reported enhanced sensory perception, particularly in her ability to detect electromagnetic fields and subtle environmental changes. Her bioluminescent patterns had become more complex and expressive, displaying colors and rhythms that no pure Valiant could produce. Most remarkably, she claimed to have moments of intuitive understanding, insights that seemed to come from nowhere, as if her mind was operating on a different level. "It's the hybrid," Dr. Vixrin explained when Marcus brought these observations to her attention. "The child's developing neural system is connected to Ambassador Thalera's through the pregnancy. As its consciousness begins to form, it's creating feedback loops with her brain, enhancing her cognitive capabilities. We're seeing the first signs of what this fusion of human and Valiant neurology can achieve." "Is that safe?" Marcus asked, worried. "Could it be harming her in some way?" "On the contrary," Vixrin replied, "all indicators suggest she's thriving. Her neuroplasticity has increased significantly. Her immune system is stronger than ever. She's not just carrying a hybrid child. She's becoming something of a hybrid herself, enhanced by the biological exchange occurring during pregnancy." This revelation led to yet another round of examinations and discussions. The research teams were fascinated by the bidirectional nature of the changes. Not only was the hybrid developing with traits from both species, but Thalera herself was being transformed by the pregnancy, her body adapting and incorporating aspects of human biology that enhanced her native capabilities. "This is unprecedented in any known species," one of the xenobiologists explained during a research briefing. "Pregnancy typically involves one-way transfer of nutrients and immune factors from mother to offspring. But in this case, we're seeing active genetic exchange in both directions. The hybrid isn't just growing inside Ambassador Thalera. It's actively rewriting her genetic code, optimizing it, making her stronger and more capable." Marcus found this both exciting and concerning. Could there be long-term effects? Changes that persist after the birth? Almost certainly, the scientist replied. Ambassador Thalera will likely retain many of these enhanced capabilities permanently. In essence, she's becoming the first adult hybrid, transformed by carrying the first hybrid child. As the pregnancy progressed into its 5th month, news of the situation began to leak beyond official channels. Despite attempts to keep the matter confidential, details reached the wider galactic community. Media outlets from dozens of worlds picked up the story, and public reaction was mixed. Some celebrated the development as a breakthrough, proof that the barriers between species could be overcome and that life could find ways to merge and adapt in beautiful, unexpected ways. Others reacted with fear and hostility, seeing the hybrid as an abomination, a violation of natural species boundaries that could lead to the loss of distinct cultural and biological identities. Protests erupted on several worlds. On Earth, groups demonstrated both for and against the hybrid child, with some calling for it to be given full human rights and others demanding that it be prevented from ever setting foot on the planet. Similar protests occurred on the Valian homeworld, with traditionalist factions arguing that the hybrid represented a contamination of Valian purity. Thalera watched these developments with a mixture of sadness and determination. "My child hasn't even been born yet," she said to Marcus during one of his visits, "and already it faces hatred from those who fear change. But I will not let that deter me. This child deserves to live, to thrive, to find its place in the galaxy." Marcus felt a surge of admiration for her strength. She could have chosen to see the pregnancy as a burden, an unwanted consequence of the medical treatment that saved her life. Instead, she had embraced it, finding meaning and purpose in the unprecedented situation. "You're going to be an amazing mother," Marcus told her sincerely. The medical bay had become a fortress of preparation and anticipation. As Thalera entered her 7th month of pregnancy, the team surrounding her had grown to include specialists from 15 different worlds, each bringing their unique expertise to ensure the safe delivery of the galaxy's first human Valian hybrid child. Marcus found himself coordinating between the various medical professionals, acting as both physician and mediator. The human doctors wanted to follow Earth protocols for delivery, emphasizing medical intervention and technology. The Valian specialists preferred their species' more natural approach, arguing that Valian births were typically low-risk events that required minimal interference. Finding a middle ground that satisfied both groups while prioritizing Thalera and the child's safety had become Marcus's daily challenge. "The child's positioning is unusual," Dr. Victron explained during one of their planning sessions, displaying a 3-dimensional scan of the fetus. "It has the limb structure of a Valian infant, but the head size proportionally closer to a human baby. We need to prepare for the possibility that delivery may be more complicated than typical Valian births." Dr. Elizabeth Warren, a human obstetric specialist who had arrived from Earth 2 weeks earlier, studied the scans with practiced eyes. "The bone structure shows remarkable flexibility, which is good. But we should be prepared for emergency intervention if needed. I recommend having surgical equipment ready, just in case." Thalera, who was present for all planning discussions, listened calmly to the medical debates. Her transformation had continued throughout the pregnancy, and she now displayed capabilities that astonished everyone who studied her. Her bioluminescent patterns had become extraordinarily complex, capable of expressing nuanced emotions and even abstract concepts through light alone. Her cognitive abilities had enhanced to the point where she could process information faster than any unmodified Valian, and she had begun demonstrating precognitive flashes, brief moments where she seemed to know what would happen seconds before it occurred. "I appreciate all your preparations," Thalera said, her voice carrying a confidence that seemed to radiate from her enhanced presence. "But I want to assure you all I can feel this child. We're connected in ways I cannot fully explain. I know the delivery will proceed smoothly. My body knows what to do." Marcus wanted to believe her, but his medical training made him cautious. Ambassador, your intuitions have been remarkably accurate, but we can't rely solely on instinct. We need to be prepared for every possibility. Thalera's patterns shifted to show patient understanding. Of course, Marcus, I'm not suggesting we abandon preparation. I'm simply telling you that you need not fear. This child and I were working together. It's not a passive passenger being carried to term. It's an active participant in its own birth. This statement would have seemed absurd if it weren't for the mounting evidence supporting it. The fetus showed neural activity far beyond what should be possible at its developmental stage. Scans indicated it was already forming complex thought patterns, and on several occasions, its bioluminescent signals had synchronized with Thalera's in what appeared to be deliberate communication. The hybrid is conscious, one of the xenobiologists had concluded after weeks of study. Not in the simple reactive way that most fetuses are, but genuinely aware and interactive. It's learned to respond to its mother's emotions, to her physical needs. This level of prenatal cognitive development is unprecedented in any known species. As the pregnancy entered its 8th month, something unexpected happened. Thalera began displaying abilities that went beyond enhanced Valian capabilities. During a routine examination, she casually mentioned that she could hear the thoughts of people near her, not words exactly, but emotional impressions and general intent. I know it sounds impossible, she explained to Marcus and Dr. Vixren, but I can sense what you're feeling. Marcus, you're worried about the delivery and feeling guilty about your role in creating this situation. Dr. Vixren, you're fascinated by the scientific implications, but also concerned about whether we're prepared for what comes after the birth. Marcus felt his skin prickle. She was exactly right. How is that possible? Telepathy doesn't exist in humans or Valians. It doesn't exist in either species separately, Dr. Vixren said, her antennae quivering with excitement. But the hybrid child is developing neural structures we've never seen before. It's creating new pathways, new ways of processing information. And through the connection with Ambassador Thalera, she's gaining access to these capabilities. Over the following weeks, Thalera's telepathic sensitivity grew stronger. She could read emotional states from across the room, sense intentions before they were voiced, and even project her own thoughts and feelings to those near her. The medical team began experiencing shared dreams, images, and sensations that seemed to originate from Thalera and the developing child, visions of stars and light, and the merging of different forms of consciousness. This is becoming more than a simple hybrid birth, Marcus told Dr. Vixren during a private conversation. We're witnessing the emergence of something entirely new, a form of consciousness that bridges species barriers. I know, Vixren replied, her 4 eyes reflecting both wonder and trepidation. The question is, what do we do with this knowledge? The governments want to control it, weaponize it potentially. But I don't think that's possible. This isn't a technology that can be replicated or controlled. It's life evolving in a new direction. The political situation had intensified as well. Representatives from multiple galactic powers had arrived at Outpost Vera 9, all wanting to secure some claim or influence over the hybrid child. The Valian High Council had sent additional ambassadors. Earth's government had dispatched diplomatic envoys. Even species that had no direct connection to humans or Valians were sending observers, recognizing that this event could reshape the balance of power in the galaxy. Marcus attended these political meetings reluctantly, finding them exhausting and often counterproductive. Everyone wanted something from the hybrid child, seeing it as an asset to be controlled rather than a person with its own rights and destiny. The child must be raised on Earth, insisted Ambassador Chun from the Unified Earth Council during one particularly tense negotiation. Human DNA comprises half its genetic structure. It has as much right to Earth's citizenship as any natural-born human. Unacceptable, countered High Counselor Reneth, his bioluminescent patterns flashing with agitation. The child was carried by a Valian mother in Valian territory. Our cultural and legal traditions give us primary claim. Thalera had finally had enough of these debates. She stood, and when she did, everyone in the room felt it. A wave of presence emanated from her, a psychic pressure that demanded attention and respect. "My child is not property to be claimed," she said, her voice carrying harmonics that hadn't been there before. "It is not a prize to be won or a weapon to be controlled. It is a person, a new form of consciousness that deserves the freedom to choose its own path." The room fell silent. Marcus watched in amazement as the hardened diplomats and politicians, people accustomed to power and authority, found themselves unable to respond to Thalera's declaration. She had become something more than a Valiant ambassador. The pregnancy had transformed her into something unprecedented, a hybrid herself in all but genetics, carrying the authority of two worlds and the power of the new consciousness developing within her. In the final weeks before the birth, Marcus spent more time with Thalera, not as her doctor, but as someone who had become deeply connected to her journey. They talked about the future, about what kind of life the child might have, about the responsibilities they both felt. "I've been thinking about names," Thalera said during one of these conversations. "In Valiant tradition, names are given based on the light patterns a child displays at birth. But this child will have capabilities beyond traditional Valiant expression. I want a name that honors both its heritages." "Do you have something in mind?" Marcus asked. "Lyra," Thalera said softly. "It's a constellation visible from Earth, a pattern of stars. But it's also close to Liara, a Valiant word meaning bridge of light. It seems appropriate for a child who bridges two worlds." Marcus felt emotion well up in his chest. "Lyra, it's beautiful." The birth began on a quiet evening, without the dramatic urgency typically associated with human deliveries. Thalera simply walked into the medical bay and announced, "It's time. Lyra is ready to be born." The medical team sprang into action with practiced efficiency. Thalera was moved to the specially prepared delivery room, connected to monitors that tracked every vital sign of both mother and child. Marcus stood beside her, along with Dr. Vixrin and Dr. Warren, while the other specialists positioned themselves around the room, ready to assist if needed. "How do you feel?" Marcus asked, holding Thalera's hand. "Strong," she replied, her bioluminescent patterns pulsing with steady, confident light. "Ready. Lyra is telling me what to do, guiding me through this." The labor progressed smoothly, far more smoothly than anyone had dared hope. Thalera's enhanced body worked with remarkable efficiency, her muscles contracting with perfect timing, her breathing regulated automatically. Throughout the process, the monitors showed something extraordinary. The child was actively participating in its own birth, adjusting its position, timing its movements to coordinate with Thalera's contractions. "This is incredible," Dr. Warren whispered, watching the readouts. "The fetus is demonstrating problem-solving behavior. It's working with the mother's body, not just being pushed through passively." Hours passed, but they felt timeless. The delivery room seemed to exist in a bubble separate from normal space, filled with an energy that everyone present could feel. Marcus found himself experiencing flashes of sensation that weren't his own. The pressure of the birth canal, the anticipation of first breath, the overwhelming desire to see light for the first time. "I can feel her too," Dr. Vixrin said, confirming Marcus's experience. "She's broadcasting her consciousness to all of us sharing this moment." Finally, after what felt like both minutes and hours, the moment arrived. With a final push, guided by instinct and the telepathic connection between mother and child, Lyra emerged into the world. The room filled with light. Lyra's bioluminescent patterns, active from the moment of birth, blazed with colors no one had ever seen before. She was small, smaller than a typical Valiant infant, but larger than a human baby, with proportions that blended both species. Her skin shimmered between pale blue and a warm peachy tone, shifting as her emotions changed. Her eyes, when they opened, were large and dark like a Valiant's, but with a depth and expressiveness that seemed almost human. She didn't cry in the way human babies did, nor did she remain silent like Valian newborns. Instead, she made a sound that was somewhere between the two, a soft vocalization that carried harmonics of both species' infant calls. And her bioluminescent patterns, already more complex than adult Valians could produce, pulsed with what could only be described as joy. Dr. Warren quickly performed the necessary checks, confirming that Lyra was healthy and breathing normally. All vital signs are excellent, she announced. Neurological responses are extraordinary. This child is already demonstrating cognitive function far beyond typical newborn levels. Thalera reached out, and Marcus carefully placed Lyra in her arms. The moment the child touched her mother's skin, their bioluminescent patterns synchronized, creating a display of light so beautiful that several of the medical staff had tears in their eyes. "Hello, my Lyra," Thalera whispered, and Marcus heard the words both spoken aloud and echoing in his mind. "Welcome to the universe. You are loved beyond measure." Marcus looked at the child in Thalera's arms, this impossible fusion of two species that shouldn't have been compatible, and felt overwhelmed by the magnitude of what they had witnessed. Lyra wasn't just a hybrid. She was something entirely new, a bridge between worlds, a proof that life could transcend the boundaries species had believed were absolute. As if sensing his thoughts, Lyra turned her large eyes toward Marcus. For a moment, their gazes locked, and Marcus felt a connection form, a recognition that went beyond words or even telepathy. She knew him, not as a stranger, but as someone intimately connected to her existence. In that moment, Marcus understood that his role in Lyra's life was just beginning. The medical team documented everything. Lyra's unique physiology, her immediate demonstration of both human and Valian traits, her unprecedented level of consciousness and communication ability. But beyond the clinical observations, there was a sense among everyone present that they had witnessed something profound, a moment that would be remembered as a turning point in galactic history. Outside the delivery room, word spread quickly. The diplomats and government representatives who had been waiting anxiously received the news. The hybrid child had been born successfully, healthy, and remarkable beyond all predictions. But inside the delivery room, politics and grand historical implications faded into the background. There was only Thalera, exhausted but radiant, holding her daughter close. There was Lyra, already exploring her new world with curious eyes and luminous patterns. And there was Marcus, who had saved a life and inadvertently created a new one, watching with wonder as mother and child bonded in ways that transcended anything either species had known before. "What happens now?" Dr. Vixrin asked softly, voicing the question they all felt. Thalera looked up, her enhanced eyes seeing not just the present, but somehow glimpsing the possibilities of the future. "Now," she said with absolute certainty, "we show the galaxy what's possible when barriers fall and life finds new ways to flourish. Lyra is just the beginning." Marcus believed her. Looking at the luminous child and her transformed mother, he understood that they weren't witnessing an ending, but a beginning, the first step toward a future where the divisions between species might gradually dissolve, creating a galaxy more unified and interconnected than anyone had dared imagine. 6 months had passed since Lyra's birth, and Outpost Vera 9 had become the most visited location in the Outer Territories. Scientists, diplomats, journalists, and curious observers from across the galaxy arrived daily, all wanting to witness the miracle child who represented the future of interspecies relations. Lyra was developing at a rate that astonished everyone who studied her. By 3 months, she was displaying cognitive abilities equivalent to a 1-year-old human or Valiant child. By 6 months, she was walking steadily on her long, graceful legs, speaking in simple words in both English and the Valian language, and demonstrating problem-solving skills that suggested intelligence far beyond her age. But it was her other abilities that truly set her apart. Lyra's telepathic sensitivity had grown exponentially since birth. She could sense emotions from everyone around her, often responding to people's feelings before they verbalized them. Her bioluminescent patterns had become a language unto themselves, expressing complex thoughts and emotions in cascades of color and light that left viewers mesmerized. Marcus had become a constant presence in Lyra's life, something that had evolved naturally rather than through any official arrangement. He visited daily, bringing small gifts and spending hours simply observing her development, documenting everything for the medical records that would help future researchers understand hybrid physiology. "Ma cuz," Lyra said one morning, her pronunciation still developing, but her intention clear. She toddled over to him with arms outstretched, her patterns flashing with happiness. Marcus scooped her up, feeling the warmth of her small body and the subtle vibration of her bioluminescent system. "Hello, little one," Marcus said, marveling as always at her unique appearance. She had grown into her features beautifully, her face a perfect blend of human and Valian characteristics. Her skin shifted between pale blue and peach depending on her mood and the lighting, and her large eyes held a depth of awareness that seemed to look right through to one's soul. Thalera watched the interaction with a gentle smile. Her own transformation had stabilized after Lyra's birth, leaving her with permanent enhancements that made her stronger, more perceptive, and more telepathically sensitive than any unmodified Valian. She had returned to her diplomatic duties, but her role had changed. She was no longer simply an ambassador representing Valian interests. She had become an advocate for a new vision of the galaxy, one where species could merge and evolve together. "She asks about you when you're not here," Thalera said. "She feels the connection between you, not just genetic but emotional. You've become family to her, Marcus." Marcus felt a lump form in his throat. He had struggled with his role in Lyra's life, uncertain whether he should maintain professional distance or embrace the paternal feelings that had grown stronger with each passing day. "I care about her deeply," he admitted. "Both of you. This wasn't supposed to be personal, but somewhere along the way, it became the most personal thing in my life." "Good," Thalera said simply. "Lyra needs people who love her for who she is, not what she represents. The galaxy sees her as a symbol, a political chess piece, a scientific curiosity. But you see her as a child who deserves love and protection. That's more valuable than any amount of genetic research or diplomatic maneuvering." The political situation remained complicated. Both Earth and the Valian homeworld continued to claim rights over Lyra, though their approaches had softened somewhat. The initial aggressive posturing had given way to more nuanced discussions about shared custody and cultural education. An agreement had been reached that Lyra would spend time on both worlds, learning about both her heritages, though the details were still being negotiated. But there were also darker currents moving through galactic politics. Not everyone celebrated Lyra's existence. Extremist groups on multiple worlds saw her as a threat to species purity, an abomination that should never have been allowed to survive. Security around Thalera and Lyra had been increased dramatically after several credible threats were discovered, and Marcus had been trained in security protocols himself, learning to spot potential dangers and protect the child he had come to love. Dr. Vixarin had taken on the role of chief researcher, coordinating studies on Lyra's development with the understanding that the child's well-being came before scientific inquiry. "We're learning so much," she told Marcus during one of their regular consultations. "Lyra's immune system is extraordinary. She's resistant to diseases that affect both humans and Valians, and her healing rate is remarkable. A minor cut that would take days to heal in either parent species closes within hours for her." "What about her telepathic abilities?" Marcus asked. "Are they still growing stronger?" "Yes, and in ways we're only beginning to understand," Vixarin replied. "She's not just reading emotions anymore. She's beginning to form deeper connections with those around her. The people who spend the most time with her, yourself, Thalera, and a few of the regular staff, report experiencing enhanced intuition and sometimes sharing thoughts or sensations with each other. It's as if Lyra is creating a telepathic network, linking the minds of those she's closest to. Marcus had noticed this phenomenon himself. He sometimes knew what Thelyra was thinking before she spoke, or felt Lyra's needs before she expressed them. It was subtle, but undeniable, a mental connection that grew stronger the more time they spent together. The breakthrough came during Lyra's 7th month, during what should have been a routine developmental assessment. Marcus was in the observation room with Lyra, engaging her in simple cognitive tests, when something unexpected happened. Lyra reached out and touched his hand, and suddenly Marcus's mind was flooded with images and sensations that weren't his own. He saw Earth as Lyra imagined it, a blue and green world spinning in space, covered with cities and forests she had only seen in pictures. He felt the Valian homeworld through her perception, a place of crystalline structures and singing lights where her mother's people lived. But more than that, he experienced her understanding of connection, her fundamental knowledge that minds could join, that consciousness wasn't limited to individual containers but could flow and merge and become something greater than its parts. The vision lasted only seconds, but when it ended, Marcus found himself gasping, tears streaming down his face. Lyra looked at him with those large, knowing eyes, her patterns pulsing with concern and curiosity. "I'm okay," Marcus assured her, though his voice shook. "That was just incredible, Lyra. You show me how you see the world." Dr. Vixrun, who had been monitoring from her console, rushed over. "What happened?" "Your neural activity spiked dramatically." "She shared her consciousness with me," Marcus explained. "Not just emotions or simple thoughts. Her entire worldview, her understanding of reality. It was like nothing I've ever experienced." This incident prompted a new round of studies. Researchers discovered that Lyra could form what they termed neural bridges, temporary connections that allowed her to share complex information and experiences directly from mind to mind. It was a form of communication far more efficient and profound than language, and it had enormous implications. Imagine if this ability could be taught, one xenopsychologist suggested during a research meeting. If other beings could learn to form these neural bridges, it could revolutionize how species interact. Misunderstandings will become nearly impossible when minds can directly share experiences and perspectives. But others were more cautious. This kind of power could also be dangerous, warned a security advisor. Mind-to-mind contact could be used to manipulate, to control, to invade privacy in ways we can't defend against. Thelyra listened to these debates with patient concern. "You're all missing the point," she finally said. "Lyra isn't a tool or a threat. She's a child learning to use her natural abilities. The question isn't how we can exploit or control what she can do. It's how we can help her develop those abilities responsibly, ethically, in ways that benefit everyone, including herself." As the months continued, Marcus watched Lyra grow into a remarkable young being. She began forming words into sentences, expressing complex thoughts in both human and Valian languages with equal fluency. Her artistic abilities emerged early, creating light paintings with her bioluminescent patterns that captured abstract concepts and emotions. She displayed empathy and compassion beyond her years, often comforting others when they were distressed, sensing their pain, and offering her unique form of understanding. But she also showed very normal childlike qualities. She loved playing, especially games that involved light and color. She had favorite food from both Earth and the Valian homeworld, though she couldn't explain why some flavors appealed to her more than others. She got frustrated when she couldn't immediately master new skills, displaying the impatience typical of young children regardless of species. Marcus found himself falling into a parental role more and more naturally. He taught Lyra about Earth, showing her recordings of oceans and mountains, animals, and cities. He explained human customs and values, helping her understand half of her heritage. Thalera did the same for Valian culture, teaching Lyra the traditional light poems and stories, the philosophical frameworks that guided Valian society, the importance of harmony and balance. Together, they were raising a child who belonged to two worlds but was limited by neither. Lyra was becoming her own person, unique and unprecedented, shaped by both heritages but defined by her own emerging personality and consciousness. The day came when Lyra spoke her first complete, complex sentence. She was standing at the viewport in Thalera's quarters, looking out at the stars when she turned to Marcus and Thalera and said, "The lights in the dark, they're calling to other lights. Everything wants to connect. Why do people work so hard to stay separate?" Marcus and Thalera exchanged glances, both stunned by the profundity of the question from a child barely 9 months old. It was Thalera who answered, kneeling beside her daughter. "Fear, my light," she said gently. "People fear losing themselves and others. They fear change, fear the unknown. They build walls to feel safe, even when those walls also keep out joy and connection." Lyra's patterns flickered thoughtfully. "But the walls hurt. I can feel everyone's walls. They make people lonely. I don't want to be lonely." "You won't be," Marcus promised, taking her small hand. "You have your mother and me and so many others who care about you. And maybe, just maybe, you can teach the galaxy that the walls don't have to be so high." It was around this time that the first major diplomatic breakthrough occurred. Representatives from 5 major galactic powers, including Earth and the Valian homeworld, came to Outpost Vera 9 for what was officially termed a Summit on Interspecies Cooperation. Unofficially, everyone knew they were coming to meet Lyra, to witness firsthand what she represented. The meeting was carefully choreographed. Lyra, now walking and talking with remarkable confidence, was brought into the diplomatic chamber accompanied by Thalera and Marcus. The ambassadors and counselors, representatives of species that had maintained careful separation for centuries, watched as the hybrid child entered. Lyra stopped in the center of the room, looking at each representative in turn. Then, with a confidence that seemed to come from somewhere beyond her months of life, she began to glow. Her bioluminescent patterns flared to life, not in the simple expressions typical of aliens, but in a complex, multi-layered display that conveyed emotion, thought, and invitation. And then she reached out telepathically, not forcefully, but gently, inviting each person present to experience her perspective. One by one, the hardened diplomats and politicians felt it, a moment of pure connection, a glimpse into a consciousness that knew no species barriers, that saw all sentient beings as fundamentally alike despite their superficial differences. When the connection faded, the room was silent. Several of the ambassadors had tears in their eyes. A Krillian military commander, known for his stoic demeanor, was openly weeping. The Thalian representative's antennae quivered with what could only be profound emotion. It was the Earth ambassador who spoke first. "Understand now," she said softly, "what she is, what she represents. It's not about politics or genetics or cultural dominance. It's about possibility. The possibility that we don't have to remain forever separate." The Valian High Counselor stood, his patterns glowing with newfound understanding. "We have guarded our distinctiveness jealously, believing that to merge with others would be to lose ourselves. But this child shows us that merging doesn't mean losing. It means becoming something greater." The summit concluded with an unprecedented declaration: the establishment of the Lyra Initiative, a program dedicated to studying and fostering peaceful interspecies cooperation and integration. Resources would be allocated to research biological compatibility between different species, not for exploitation, but for understanding. Educational programs would be developed to teach species about each other, breaking down the barriers of ignorance and fear. Most importantly, Lyra herself would be protected and supported. Rather than being claimed by one world or another, she would be recognized as a citizen of the galaxy itself, free to travel between worlds, to learn from multiple cultures, to be the bridge she was always meant to be. That evening, after the diplomats had departed and the station had returned to its usual routine, Marcus sat with Thalera and Lyra in their quarters. Lyra was tired from the day's events, curled up against her mother, her patterns dim and gentle with approaching sleep. "Do you think it will work?" Marcus asked. The Lyra initiative, all these promises about cooperation and understanding. "I think Lyra gave them hope," Thalera replied, stroking her daughter's hair. "And hope is where change begins. Will it be easy? No. Will there be setbacks and resistance? Certainly. But something fundamental shifted today. They felt what I felt when I first connected with her. They understood that separation is a choice, not a necessity." Marcus watched Lyra's sleeping face, so peaceful despite the weight of expectations resting on her small shoulders. She shouldn't have to carry this burden alone. The responsibility to unite the galaxy, that's too much for one child. "She won't be alone," Thalera said firmly. "She has us, and soon she'll have others like her. The medical research teams have made breakthroughs based on her genetics. They believe they can now facilitate compatible cross-species reproduction in controlled, ethical ways. There will be more hybrids, more bridges between worlds. Lyra is the first, but she won't be the last." The thought filled Marcus with a mixture of excitement and trepidation. A galaxy of hybrids, children who belong to multiple worlds, who could naturally form the connections that had taken centuries of diplomacy to establish. It was a beautiful vision, but also a profound transformation of galactic society. "Whatever comes," Marcus said, "we'll face it together. All three of us." Thalera's patterns glowed with warmth and agreement. "Together," she affirmed. As Marcus left their quarters that night and walked through the quiet corridors of Outpost Vera 9, he reflected on the incredible journey that had brought them to this point. What had started as a desperate medical procedure to save a dying patient had become something far more significant. He had helped create a new form of life, had watched that life grow into a being of remarkable capabilities and potential. But more than that, he had become part of a family, bound not by conventional biology, but by love, shared experience, and a commitment to protecting and nurturing something precious. He thought about his initial worries, his fears about the consequences of the transfusion, his uncertainty about his role in Lyra's life. All of those concerns seemed trivial now compared to the reality he was living. Yes, there were challenges ahead. Yes, there would be those who opposed what Lyra represented. Yes, the future was uncertain and potentially dangerous. But there's also beauty, wonder, and the genuine possibility of a better future. A future where the barriers between species gradually dissolved, where consciousness could connect and merge, where children like Lyra could exist not as anomalies, but as welcomed members of a truly united galactic community. Marcus stopped at a viewport, looking out at the stars that surrounded the station. Somewhere out there was Earth, his homeworld, the planet that had given rise to humanity's fierce adaptability and indomitable spirit. Somewhere else was the Valian homeworld, birthplace of wisdom and light. And here, on this small outpost floating in the void, those two worlds had merged in the form of a remarkable child who might just change everything. The human blood that had healed an alien ambassador had sparked something far greater than anyone could have predicted. It had sparked hope, possibility, and a new chapter in galactic history. Marcus smiled, feeling grateful beyond words for the chance to witness and be part of this transformation. Behind him, in her quarters, Lyra stirred in her sleep. Her patterns flickered gently, and across the station, in their dreams, those who had connected with her experienced a shared vision, stars drawing closer together, light merging with light, consciousness joining in harmony, and walls that had stood for ages finally, peacefully coming down. The future was calling, bright with possibility, and Lyra was just beginning to answer. Thalera's patterns brightened with warmth. And you, Marcus, whether you intended it or not, will always be connected to this child. Your blood gave it life. Your DNA is woven into its very existence. We're in this together, whatever comes. Marcus hadn't fully processed his own role in all of this. He wasn't the father in any traditional sense, yet his genetic material had contributed to creating this new life. What did that make him? What responsibilities did he have to this child? These questions weighed on him as the birth drew closer, unanswered and deeply personal. But one thing was becoming clear to Marcus as he watched Thalera's continued transformation and monitored the hybrid's healthy development. Life, in all its forms, had an incredible capacity to adapt, to merge, to create something new from seemingly incompatible elements. What had begun as a desperate medical intervention to save one life had become something far more significant. It had become proof that the future of the galaxy might lie not in the preservation of separate species' identities, but in the brave new possibilities that emerged when those boundaries dissolved, creating something entirely unprecedented in the process.